welcome to the 11th exercise! Before we get started, you'll notice that today's video is formatted a little differently than the others up until now. Whereas before, I would record myself live and splice 2 to 3 hours of raw footage into about 20 to 25 minutes, now I've recorded myself, fully time-lapsed everything, and added my voice over top reading from a script that I've written. While this may not seem like much, it literally cut out 50% of my production time. Now, what does that mean? Well, now I'm not exhausted after making a video, and will actually have time and energy left over to practice on my own outside of making videos. It's actually been so long since my last practice day that I've straight up forgotten how to draw people. Entirely. And what I realized is, this is an animation channel, not a video editing channel, and I need to stay true to that. So, goodbye text blips and emoticons. Goodbye splicing up sentences and hours of angst and suffering at the hands of meticulous cutting and pasting. I learned a lot from you all. And when I can afford an editor of my own, I certainly hope to see you all again. With that, here's to new beginnings. Now, it may be rough waters at the get-go, but like everything else, I am dedicated to making this the best content that it can be for your viewing pleasure. So with that, let's get to it. Today we begin the climax of our Sack-a-roo experience. In honor of his hard work, we're going to try something new. A loop. See, all the animations we've done so far are one and done, so today we'll work to make an animation designed to loop on for eternity, much like our love for our little buddy. First, we have the exercise in question, Flour Sack kicking a ball. And as I pondered what the loop would be, I thought it might be fun and flavorful to circle back to our roots and add in a past exercise, ball bouncing across the screen. With those two together, we get Flour Sack kicks a ball across the screen, and the loop will be the ball hitting a wall and rolling back to its starting position. I actually had to stand up a lot while planning this one out to get a feeling for how the arms swing during the kick. Like if the right leg is doing the action, then the left arm mirrors its proximity to the body, and the right arm is the reverse to maintain balance. So I also caught myself leaning forward during the anticipation of the kick, so I'll need to account for that as well. As for the ball, it occurred to me that, well, not only will it squash and stretch while bouncing through the air, but also in a separate instance at the beginning when it bounces off the flour sack's foot. So this means I'll need to think critically about the material the ball is made out of to ensure its squash and stretch is consistent throughout. Now, as we move to the technical part of the planning stage, you'll notice that I labeled the last two keyframes as K1B and K1C, or keyframe 1B and keyframe 1C respectively. Because if you think about it, while the ball is bouncing, there's really not much for the flour sack to do but just stand there and wait. Of course, I could give him something to do, but that would create two moving objects on either side of the screen, which directly contradicts the rules for staging that we learned in the last exercise. So first, I needed to figure out how to draw the sack in a relaxed position, which wasn't so much a problem of planning so much as him just ending up looking sad for a while until I got it just right. As you can see, he actually had a hunchback thing going on for a while, which definitely wasn't what I was looking for, but I found that shaving off the excess sackage at the top helped out with that. In anticipation of the kick, I made an arc originating from the tip of the sack to see if I could predict the range of motion that the kick action might comprise. I didn't actually use this as a hard reference so much as a mental note to keep track of when the leg might be drawn too long or too short for future frames. Now came a pretty difficult time of trying to figure out exactly how to draw a sack in a kicking pose from this sort of 3/4 angle. I figured I'd start with the arms like I normally do. Unfortunately, this wasn't inspiring me to see the pose I wanted to make, so I checked a few references for people in this pose, and I gotta say, it was validating to see that my key poses were, in theory, on the right track, but honestly, references images of people didn't really give me much to visually work off of regarding a sack of flour, so I just decided to wing it. As I went, it occurred to me that the left arm would be behind the body at this point, so I got him some practice using overlapping lines to show that perspective. Of course, now I needed to figure out how to show the same perspective with the leg that was supposed to kick the ball, and in retrospect, I'm kinda surprised it took me so long to put two and two together and apply the overlapping lines solution to the leg problem. Finally here, before we move on, note the wiggly line at the top of the sack here that bends with his arms. See, not only does this make distinct the head of Sack-a-roo in the drawing that is otherwise devoid of any actual detail, but it also visually reinforces his body as it contorts from pose to pose, which further solidifies the motion without really needing to say much. And here's where the long haul begins. If I thought the anticipation pose was going to be a doozy, boy oh boy was I not prepared for the kick. There are a lot of pauses in this section because I spent so much time just staring at the lines trying to figure out how to twist the body in one direction while the leg kicked out in the other. Now this time the references had something to offer, even regarding a non-human character. I saw how the left arm swings to the front of the body as the right leg kicks, and I got a sense of its angle and perspective, which actually really solidified the upper body section of the frame. This was, of course, absolutely no help when looking at the leg, though. I was completely on my own. The problem was this. Human legs are separate objects, so in such an exaggerated pose as a kick, they only briefly overlap around the groin area. The flour sack is not so dexterously blessed. His legs are attached in that they're really one rectangular object that sort of bends to simulate the visual effect of leg movement. This means that despite needing to show one leg being in front of the other, I still had to draw the overlapping lines in a way that always conveys them as one object. I tried to solve this by focusing on the placement of the leg attached to the ground. After all, the kicking leg is always going to be in front and in the air. So, if I need to make adjustments, the grounded leg is the only one which really has room to move. At first, it made sense to put the grounded leg opposite the kicking leg, mirroring the opposite sides thing that the arms had going on. I mean, it makes sense in terms of balance, right? The problem was, I just could not figure out how to smooth out the two legs to still make it look like they were both one object and two legs. Just kind of ended up looking like he had a leg growing out of his torso. I'd hoped looking up other flour sack references would reveal the secret of making a believable bendy boy, which, in a sense, it did, but everyone else just had him twisting while standing in place. As opposed to me, which is he's performing an action. So I figured to heck with it, and tried it with the grounded leg immediately behind the kicking leg instead, essentially making it so that it doesn't move at all between the frames. And lo and behold, once I took time to arrange all the frames, using the grounded foot as an anchor point, and rolling the frames revealed that this was totally the right call. I was actually kind of surprised that it looked as believable as it did. Full disclosure. From there, all that was left to do was to sort out all the wrinkles and the folds that really emphasized the stretching going on from the twisting tension between the sack's right arm and right leg. From here, I honestly ran out of key poses to draw, so I figured I would just give a shot at some of the breakdowns, considering the drastic changes that these poses go through. The biggest struggle that I had with the first breakdown was that as the right arm goes from neutral to forwards during this anticipation action, it actually ends up pointing straight at the camera. Until now, I've never had to draw anything at such a direct perspective before. I really had no idea what the corner of the sack would even look like from that angle. So I just kind of took a wild guess and moved on to the other arm, which you can see I completely hid from view as it transitions from stationary to behind the sack towards the kick's anticipatory frame. Eventually, it just hit me like a brick wall. I don't need to distinctly draw the corner seam of the sack's arm as it passes the camera. I just need to imply it. And honestly, what a better way to do that than with the tassels, which, due to momentum, they're always going to be parallel to the plane of view of the camera. So I just have the arm disappear when it's straight on, and then the location of the tassel's connection to the arm, it just essentially points that, here's where the arm is, trust me! And now, of course, I needed to break down the distance between the anticipatory frame and the kick frame. Well, after learning how effective the overlap lines are, the transitions of the left arm swinging from the back of the body to the front was surprisingly easy to piece together. The right arm, on the other hand, while easy to make, just kind of felt weird the whole time and was actually a bit shorter than I wanted. But I only realized this, though, once I began scrolling the frames and seeing the arc of the arm in real time. So I was able to just, stretch it out the way that I wanted to, once I actually figured that out. But overall, though, the whole frame just feels off somehow. And originally I was kind of worried about that, but then I remembered watching some animation breakdown videos, which they said that even in professional animated products, movies, shows, etc., they can have really odd-looking in-betweens that, in a vacuum, are actually pretty funny-looking. Yet, in the context of the whole, when paired on either side by hundreds of other frames, these oddities just get left up as blips on the radar, lost in the overarching motion of the animation. So, usually it's fine, and most people don't notice them. Overall, though, I'm pretty satisfied with what I got accomplished. It's worth noting, though, that it's really not that much in terms of quantity of frames drawn, and that's okay. So these poses were really challenging for me to wrap my head around, and learning to think in new perspectives takes time, so I guess that some days it's high quality and low quantity, and vice versa for other days. So with that, I will see you all next time, and y'all have yourselves a wonderful however long. And there you have it! Now, I know that there's plenty of work to be done to smooth out the rough edges, but I smell potential, which has absolutely nothing to do with this being the only sustainable way for me personally to continue making these videos as a solo content creator, which I will keep doing, because it's fun as hell. Oh yeah, and Justin Brown taught me how to make thumbnails.